I don't give a where the money comes from. Like I would have loved to just get handed the money on a silver platter. It's like borrowing money from friends. Like I asked my parents for money and they cut me off, and it was...
They cut you off?
They never really loaned me any money, yeah.
So it's been a long minute since we last checked in on Dan Bilzerian, almost 4 years to be exact. And the last time we talked about him, the cracks were showing everywhere. His endless stories were getting exposed, and his company was spiraling in plain sight. Back then, he was splurging like crazy with his daddy's money on things nobody asked for, then magically calling them business expenses.
What does your family think of your outlandish lifestyle?
I don't know. Like, I'm not super close to them, so... My dad, I haven't gotten money from them, so my attitude was always just like, well, I'm gonna do whatever the I want to do, and that's kind of the beauty of not having to rely on them for money, is that you can really have freedom.
A $75,000 paintball field, a $40,000 rock climbing wall, a $31,000 Star Wars-style gun collection, just to name a few flashy examples. And here's the kicker, pretty much everything else tied to his so-called luxury life, from the mansion to the yacht to the women in his Instagram shots, was rented, staged, or borrowed just long enough to sell a fantasy. Recently, I took another deep dive into the world of Instagram's biggest cap artist, and what I found was wild. We're talking next-level deception, a brand new hustle aimed straight at insecure followers, and some truly eye-opening revelations. That includes his newest stories, his latest schemes, and the jaw-dropping collapse of his company, Ignite, so bad it ended with him suing his own father. In Dan's head, and probably in the head of that one guy who never moved on from his glory days, he's some kind of legend. But let's be real. To me, it's painfully obvious that Dan has built his entire persona on insecurity, smoke, and mirrors. And the illusion is finally running out of places to hide. The guy basically plays dress-up as a modern-day Hugh Hefner, someone he's openly admitted is his hero. But here's the problem. Unlike Hugh, Dan didn't build anything himself, and it clearly eats at him that he's really just a glorified trust fund kid with major daddy issues. That insecurity explains why, for years, he's pushed the story that he made tens of millions of dollars grinding private poker games with billionaires. It sounds legendary on paper, but the more you look into it, the less it holds up. After digging around, that story starts falling apart fast. Either Dan pulled off the greatest poker miracle in human history, or there's another explanation. And that's where his father, Paul Bilzerian, enters the chat. Paul Bilzerian isn't some misunderstood genius. He's a documented fraudster. Just last year, he was named in a civil lawsuit by the SEC, which claims he spent 31 years dodging them while racking up a jaw-dropping $180 million in debt. Now, let me be clear. I don't care where money comes from in theory, but the fairy tale version of Paul as a brilliant academic hero doesn't match reality. Yes, he went to Stanford and Harvard, but instead of using that brain power for good, he allegedly spent decades misleading companies that trusted him to help, only to leave them burned. He pulled this off using something called stock parking, and it's as shady as it sounds. That's when someone tells a stockbroker to buy shares under the broker's name, never telling the company who really owns them. Think of it like a pizza. I hand out the slices so it looks fair from the outside. He gets a slice, she gets a slice, even that guy gets a slice. But behind the scenes, everyone already agreed those slices are coming right back to me later. So to the public, the pizza looks split up, but in reality, I still control the whole thing. The goal is to hide how much pizza, or in this case, stock, you actually own until it's too late. It gets worse. Paul wasn't even using his own money. He was buying stock with other investors' cash, people who believed he was growing their wealth. Instead, he was secretly stacking power for himself. Once he controlled enough shares, he'd pull a hostile takeover. That move sent companies into full panic mode, forcing them, or a so-called white knight, to buy the stock back at a premium just to survive. That tactic is called greenmail. It's basically using the threat of takeover as leverage to get paid to walk away. Paul raked in tens of millions doing this in the 80s, and even after getting slapped with fraud charges, he only served a little over a year in prison. And the wildest part? He never even had to pay those people back. He simply declared bankruptcy and walked away from the wreckage like nothing happened. Now fast forward to modern times, and this is where a lot of people think Dan's trust fund money really came from, whether through the usual channels or tucked away in offshore accounts. Even today, his dad was still pulling strings behind the scenes at Ignite, officially labeled as an unpaid consultant. Unpaid on paper maybe, but clearly not uninvolved. Then Ignite landed smack in the middle of a massive SEC investigation, and that chaos ended with Dan suing his own father. So what's the real story here? Is Dan the villain, just wildly insecure? Or is this all one giant cover for his dad's mess? Let's dig in. Just last year, the SEC went after Ignite and Paul Bilzerian, but not Dan, claiming the company reported falsified revenue records in the final quarter of 2020. Allegedly, Paul and his circle inflated sales numbers to make investors think the business was booming. On paper, it looked like Ignite was moving huge amounts of vape pens. That announcement sent the stock soaring over 150%, making it seem like the company had finally found its footing after years in the gutter. But here's the problem. The company that Ignite claimed bought all those vape pens came out and said it never happened. Not one sale, not one shipment, nothing at all. According to them, no money changed hands and no vapes ever moved. Nothing at all. They kept disputing the so-called purchase, like, what are you even talking about? And when Ignite got audited over this mess, Paul allegedly tried to clean it up by routing the deal through a shell company he also controlled to make it look legit. Now, people are alleging that Paul was using Ignite, and Dan right along with it, as a hiding place for his wealth the entire time. The claim is that millions were funneled through shell companies and disguised as Ignite business to keep everything out of sight. But history repeats itself. Paul allegedly got sloppy again, and now decades of questionable moves are being rolled into one massive case, with the SEC still coming for that $180 million. Dan is officially furious with his father, and that's where his lawsuit against his dad, his business partners, and his former company comes into play. Dan claims they cooked up a plan to push him out of his own CEO position. And it doesn't stop there. He also alleges that even after kicking him out, they kept using him as Ignite's poster boy, while blocking him from using his own likeness to work with or build a new brand. What's wild is that in the lawsuit, Dan goes full scorched earth on his own father. He brings up Paul's long history of fraud charges and openly acknowledges just how shady he's been over the years, all while insisting that, despite being the CEO, he was really just the face of Ignite the entire time. He claims he had absolutely nothing to do with day-to-day operations, which, let's be honest, is a tough sell. But according to Dan, he raised concerns years ago with the shareholders, meaning his father and his father's circle, about the company's direction, and their response was to terminate him at the end of 2023. That's when this whole situation really turned into a war. By June of last year, 2024, things allegedly got even uglier, with Dan being fully pushed out of the company and stripped of his chairman of the board role. Dan says that move was illegal. He claims they never secured the required 67% board approval, yet Ignite continued using his image everywhere like nothing changed. Those 2 points, his removal and the continued use of his likeness, are the core of his lawsuit. From the outside looking in, it sure looks like Ignite was bankrolling Dan's lifestyle for years, and that may have been the price of helping his dad move money around behind the scenes. It's public knowledge that millions were spent on photo shoots, yacht rentals, and flashy visuals that had nothing to do with building a real company. And I've got a hard time believing Dan had no idea what was going on the whole time. Now Dan is claiming he was just an unassuming victim in all of this. And honestly, I almost get why he's playing that card. It really does look like his father allegedly tried to throw his own son under the bus when things started falling apart. So now Dan wants his dad to cut him a check for $50 million. And here's the funny part. He suddenly wants to take a deep dive into Ignite's actual numbers. That's wild to hear from someone who spent years hyping himself up on the supposed success of this company and those totally believable revenue stats. Let's be real, I've never once seen a single Ignite product out in public. Yet Dan was acting like they were everywhere, as popular as the stuff you see at every gas station. And the timing makes everything click. This all started blowing up at the end of 2023, which just happens to be when Dan rolled out his latest hustle. Now he's reinvented himself as a paid dating guru for men, positioning himself as some kind of expert on how to get girls. Like, yeah, okay. Because I'm sure none of that attention had anything to do with money, fame, or the lifestyle built off his father's very questionable moves. And it's honestly wild how every interviewer he sits down with treats him like royalty. There's zero pushback. Zero challenge, just non-stop praise from people who should absolutely know better. I even went and checked out his dating advice site, called Sigma Society, and wow, it's clear he borrowed straight from that influencer-style online course playbook. Right on the front page, he promises, learn how to attract the women you want without needing looks or money. Yeah, sure. The setup is almost comical. You fill out a little questionnaire, then watch a video of Dan talking at you, And depending on how much money you say you make, the offer magically changes. If you claim you make under $100,000 a year, you're pushed toward a $200 course, one he has the nerve to value at $4,000. And let's be clear, that's $200 every single month, not some one-time deal. Now, if you say you make over $100,000, suddenly you're qualified for a personal call with Dan himself. And honestly, watching the testimonial videos on that site might be the most entertaining part of this whole circus. At the end of the day, this guy still won't admit he's a trust fund kid. He exaggerates his military background, claims things that don't line up, and nearly every story he tells falls apart under even light scrutiny. It's hard to believe anything he says, but clearly the SEC is listening closely, and they've got way more patience for this than the rest of us. A lot of people now believe Dan may have been the whistleblower that kicked off this whole shakedown. Allegedly, of course. He's not being charged in the SEC lawsuit against his father and his father's inner circle, which is pretty interesting considering how deeply involved he was with the company. And to me, that screams compliance. What really gets me, though, after watching hours on hours of interviews and absorbing way too much Dan content for my own sanity, is the funniest part of all. This guy seems to have a bizarre fantasy about role-playing as a normal, everyday person, making a standard paycheck, like he's just another regular dude grinding it out. But either way, I want to hear what you think. Drop your thoughts on this latest Dan update in the comments below. Argue, agree, go back and forth. I'm reading all of it. If you enjoyed the breakdown, make sure to smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more deep dives like this. Share the video with a friend who needs to see it, and keep the conversation going. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.